My name is Marni Hope, Marni. My last name Hope, Hope. I'd like to actually go by my Blackfoot name that was gifted to me, and it's Misami Gitstigaki, meaning long time offering. I currently live in Lethbridge, Alberta. Yes, my home community is in Standoff. It's part of the Blackfoot Confederacy, also known as the Blood Reserve or Ghana. So it's really ironic because I lived as an adoptee. I bordered the reserve that I actually came from. So just outside of Lethbridge, my parents' ranch basically bordered the Blood Reserve. So just outside of Lethbridge. So I was home, but not home. My life before I was adopted, I have no recollection of that because I was 8 months old when I was eventually adopted to my settler colonial family. So I don't have any recollection of the actual, the 8 months prior to being adopted. So my experiences in my adopted home was actually a really good one. My adopted parents were unable to have children of their own. So adoption for them was really the only option. And, it came with lots of love. However, culture was never something that was talked about because I think it's just something that they didn't know, and they were just doing the best that they could at that time. And so, going throughout my life, as an adoptee, like I said, there was lots and lots of love and support, but culture was never something that was really talked about. But yes, lots of love, and so I'm very fortunate to be raised in a very loving home. I didn't have any connection to my Indigenous heritage in my adoption home. I was adopted to two non-Indigenous people, and I actually, when I joined their family, my parents had adopted my brother, and he is actually African American. So you can imagine how unique our family photo would have looked. My two white parents, and then my African American brother, and then my Indigenous self. But I didn't really see color until later on in life when I started to deal with racism and being told I was different by the people around me, the neighborhood kids. They made it very obvious that I was different, and it wasn't until then that I realized that I wasn't really like my parents, because like I said, I didn't really see color until that part of my life kind of creeped in. I didn't know I was Indigenous until the neighborhood bully decided to target my brother and I. And it was then that I soon realized that it wasn't okay to be Indigenous, and that being Indigenous was a bad thing. I dealt with lots of abuse by this bully, and it's something that I've had to deal with for all of my life, and that I still currently deal with today. But in hindsight, it's made me stronger. My experience in grade school and middle school and beyond was one of confusion and really feeling alone most of the time, because that was around the time that bullying had started, and racism had set in. and for my brother and for myself. And so I had to, deal with that kind of during those years. And those were the years that were most traumatic for me, because, I was dealing with a loss of identity. And that was really when it became apparent that I was very different from the rest of society. And, in my middle school years, I was one of the only Indigenous people in a very small town. And so then again, there I was feeling like I was the only person, of indigeneity. And that was, that was hard to deal with, because, during those times you really just want to fit in. But I knew, because of the color of my skin and the fact that I'm Indigenous, and no one else around me to support me and to make me feel like it was okay to be Indigenous. There was no one there, to make me feel like it was okay. So that's really where the self-harm and the pieces of my life that really set the stage, not in a good way, because I was really struggling with my identity and trying to figure out why do I have to go through this? What did I do to deserve this? And so that kind of turned into a snowball effect. And then from there, I turned to sports. That was really my only saving grace during that time. I was always athletic, and I joined all the sports teams in middle school. And, so that really saved me. But one of the things that, when I look back and, when you're middle school, you just really want to fit in more than anything. You're not going to school to really for science or math. You're going there to socialize and to make friends. And yes, I had lots of great, great friends, but, I struggled with fitting in and just always feeling different and never truly accepted. I'll never forget a comment that I heard. One of the boys in middle school said to another boy, Marni's really cute. You should date her or ask her to go out. Or back then they used to say, do you want to go around with me? And one of the boys said, yeah, she is really cute, but I would never be caught dead dating a Native. And those words have stayed with me and sit with me. And, it's very hurtful and is still hurtful. But, I've come a long way from them. And like I said earlier, the sports is really what saved my life, because it gave me something to fill me up, to fill my bucket, to get me going from one day to the next. And then from there, I ended up going off to play basketball post-secondary. And so there it was again, sports saved me. And, I got my education and got to play a sport that I loved, and I made friends. And I actually had a girl on my team who was Cree. And that was the first time that I'd ever seen an Indigenous person so proud of who they are and where they come from. And, I really thought to myself, if she can be proud of who she is, why can't I? And so that was a really pivotal moment for me, seeing somebody like her who looked like me, be proud of where they came from and who they were. So I decided to come back to Lethbridge and go into post-secondary, but to study Indigenous people. I thought that was the only way I was going to really get to know who I was. So I'd gone over to the University of Lethbridge and I talked to Leroy Littlebear, and I asked him, what should I do? How can I learn about my people? And he suggested the University of Lethbridge, but I really wanted to move away and do this on my own. And so he suggested I go to Trent University. And I know nobody knew where Trent University was at that time. And he said, well, they have one of the most prestigious kind of post-secondary institutions that, offers Indigenous studies. I think you should go there. So I applied and I made myself, got in, and there I was off to Trent University in Peterborough, Ontario. And I'll never forget the first day of classes. It was an Indigenous 1000 class. And I walked in and the whole room was filled with Indigenous peoples from across this country. And that was the very first time in my life that I ever felt like I belonged and that it was okay to be Indigenous. So again, another pivotal moment for me. So I think, post-secondary for giving me that push and that strength to keep moving forward. I did experience racism. There was the neighborhood bully that made it apparent that I was different, and he did everything he could to make it known that I was not, it wasn't okay to be who I was. He would target me on the way home from school, and it was a very, very traumatic time in my life. The things that I had to put up with and deal with, and I still deal with those today. But yes, I dealt with racism throughout all of my youth. My relationship with my adopted family is a pretty close one, I would say. Over the years, I was very fortunate to be able to meet my birth family, my biological family, and my adopted family was very supportive and still is today. And I think that they've realized and recognized that, I needed to find out who I was and where I came from. And so they just provided that love and support for me to do that, and also the space to do it. And, there's never really any questions asked. It's what I'm willing to share with them. And so there's no pressure. I would say my adoption was successful, but it also is something that sits with me every single day. Now that I'm older, I've had lots of opportunity to access tools to help me deal with the fact that I'm adopted. But I don't think any adopted person ever really feels like the adoption is successful, because we are taken from our birth families, and that's our identity. That is what makes us who we are. And so going through life and not feeling like you belong is not success. And adoption is, yes, you can be raised in a good family and have loving parents and supportive people around you, but there's something about that tie to your family, your roots, your culture, that is your identity. That is what makes you a whole person. And when you don't have that as an adoptee, you deal with that every single day. And it's always at the back of your mind. You're always continually trying to feel like you belong, and trying to understand why it was you is something that I feel that a lot of adoptees feel is just, why me? Why was I the one that was given up for adoption? So it's painful. It's very painful, but this is my life, and this is who I am. It is part of my identity. Identity to me means, who are you? Where do you come from? What makes you you? Why do you have the hands that you have? Why do you have the smile that you have? It's about your culture. I'm Blackfoot. I'm proud to be Blackfoot. Identity is about, for me now, it's about ceremony, language, my elders, my cultural advisors, the people that, identity is also about knowing where you fit in, why you're the history of your people, and the blood that runs through your veins is also part of your identity. I did search for my birth family in my early 20s, and I've met the majority of them. It's a big family, and like most Indigenous families are, I'm continually finding, as I learn about my culture and become ingrained in that, I have the opportunity to meet more and more of my family. And it was a good experience when I initially met my mother. It was, of course, very nerve-wracking and scary. But I think as an adopted person, you want to see why you look the way that you look. Where do those characteristics come from? That's I think that's human nature, to want to know why you look the way that you do. And so when I met my mother for the first time, I looked her up and down, and I found all these qualities that were similar to mine. And that was the first time that I felt that connection again. And, since then I've stayed closely connected to one of my brothers. And, so it's a process. It's not something that's going to happen overnight, because, I was torn and ripped from her at birth. I never had that opportunity to be breastfed by her, or to be held and to be nurtured and be told that I was loved at that moment of birth. So, that is painful. And when I met her, I know that it's been painful for her also. And it will take many, many years for us to build that motherly connection that was stolen from us both. I have reconnected with my family and my community, and I currently work in an institution where I'm the Indigenous Student Support and Events Coordinator. And within my role, I get to spend time with two of the elders from my community. And, I'm extremely blessed that I get to do that. And every single day that I work with the students who are also from my community, that helps me build that connection. And through my story, I'm able to encourage them to continue to find their truth and to build their identity. A lot of our people in our community are dealing with that loss of identity due to residential school and, those dysfunctions that came with it. So if I can be somebody to look up to, that's what I do. I now know that my voice matters, and that my experience and the things that I've gone through in trying to regain my identity that was taken from me is a way to give back. Reciprocity is a very big thing for us as Blackfoot people. And I'm reminded daily that, I need to share what I know. And so the more that I learn about myself and connect with my culture and go to ceremony, I feel like I have that strength and confidence that I can do that. I can give back, and I can encourage our youth to keep moving forward, and that we are resilient people. We wouldn't be here had our ancestors not worked so hard for us to be here. So I remind them that we are very resilient, and that it's our duty to continue to move forward and learn about yourself and be proud of who you are. So for me as a 60 Scoop survivor, and working through that well-being piece, one of the words in Blackfoot that I've heard is gekyosin. So how do you come to a place of knowing? And within that, I've realized and recognized that balance is what I try to attain for that holistic way of living and being. And so for me, I consciously keep in touch with the mental piece of myself, the physical, the spiritual, and the physical. So physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, I have to remind myself that I need to keep in balance in those 4 components of who I am. I think as a 60 Scoop survivor, we tend to do a lot of veering in and out, going to the right. Our non-Indigenous self and our Indigenous self, it's a very common thing for us. And sometimes I find myself way over in the right side, which we'll say is the Indigenous side. And everything I do is over there, and I'm being very Indigenous, and but that's not who I am. I have to remind myself that there's also the non-Indigenous side of myself, because that's how I grew up, and I can't turn a blind eye to that side of myself either. So I do a lot of veering in and out, and so my goal is also to try and walk that path with one foot on the left and one foot on the right. And so in order to do that, I very consciously try to work around those four pieces: the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And when I'm doing that and I'm doing it well, then I can walk that path with both feet on both sides. And that is where I find that is where I'm healthiest, and that is where I'm most holistic in my ways. So currently in my process of healing, I have returned back to ceremony and my culture. I know that is what is needed most for me in order to feel complete and to feel whole. So I take every opportunity that I get to go to ceremony, to go to all-night smokes, and to connect with my elders, learn my language, and in the summer go to Sundance, and to take all of those opportunities in is what I do personally to keep myself well. I would like Canadians to know that as Indigenous peoples, we have been on this land since time immemorial. And if you really think about that, that is very powerful. You have the knowledge to know how to live on this land. The environment that I grew up in southern Alberta is, the elements can be very tough, and I just think of my ancestors surviving through the winters that we have. And to have done that since time immemorial is very, very impressive. And it makes me so proud to be Blackfoot, to be Indigenous, and that my ancestors and, all that they have been through to have survived, those memories are in my blood. And so it doesn't surprise me that I'm still here and that I'm still able to walk one step further every single day. And so now I'm so excited to be able to share that I'm Indigenous, because I'm so proud of who I am and where I come from. And I owe it to my ancestors. They worked so hard to allow me to be here today. So that's what I want Canadians to know. So this opportunity to be here this weekend with other fellow adoptees, who I now call my brothers and sisters, has been an amazing experience. Being able to connect with other Indigenous cultures just fills my bucket up and makes me feel like I did at Trent that first day when I walked into that classroom and connected with all those Indigenous people. We all have our own stories, which are very different. No two stories are the same, but the thing that we have that really connects us as adoptees, 60 Scoop survivors, is that we understand each other. It's a common language that we have. We don't even need to really speak to each other. We already just get each other for knowing what the similarities that we've been through as adoptees. So it's been an amazing experience to connect and to just build those kinships across this country. And anytime you can make another friend, find another support person to help you get through this experience, is a win. So it just builds that strength and an opportunity to collaborate down the road, and to, our voices need to be heard. And so it's really encouraging to see other 60 Scoop survivors here, to hear their stories and, collaborate. There's lots of opportunity to, I think down the road, to get together and maybe share our stories in different ways. I would be more than happy to have any of these survivors come out to southern Alberta and to have them share their story, because our stories need to be told. I would say to the bully today, look at me now. Look at how far I've come. Yes, you hurt me, and the pain is scarring, but it's just given me actually a tool to allow me to get to where I am today, and to be able to share my story and to share it proudly. And I know through my story that if I can just encourage one Indigenous youth or somebody who's going through a similar experience to keep moving forward and to keep their head above ground, that's what that bully has done. My Black brother, my African American brother, he also was going through his own kind of crap because he was also dealing with the same things I was dealing with. Him and I never really talked about our cultures because we didn't know about it. That's what adoption does, is that it steals you from knowing your identity. So he was going through the same thing I was, but he supported me. He loves me, and we really did kind of walk through that racism piece together. But we didn't really talk about it a lot, I think, because it was just too painful. It's that pain where you just know someone's going through it, but you don't need to talk about it. But yeah, that's kind of where we were with it. Yeah, my adopted parents talked about, adoption when we got older, when we could understand really what adoption meant. And it was unfortunate that my parents couldn't have kids of their own. And, that was their only solution, was through adoption. But it's only been recently that they found out that they were actually part of the 60's scoop. They didn't know that they were adopting a child who was stolen, ripped away from their Indigenous families, and contributing to the Canadian policies of assimilation. So that has been, I would imagine that has been hard for them to accept that, knowing that they were part of a system that was so detrimental to Indigenous peoples in this country. I think it's been heartbreaking for them to find out this late in life that they were part of an assimilation policy, Canada's dirty little secret. And, I can't really speak for them, but I would imagine that they're trying to deal with it in their own way. And so that's another failure to adoption for them, right? For all of us, is that their intentions were good, but many, many years later, they find out that the adoption wasn't really a clean adoption, that it was so misconstrued and part of the problem. No, because I think they've just let me go through the motions in my own time and figure out what it is that I need. I think they look at it like she's doing what she needs to do to deal with her adoption, and they don't really talk about their feelings around the fact that it's a 60's scoop. But I can see that it's been hurtful. And they're older now. They're quite old now. So it sucks that they are at their older years in their life and having to deal with this pain that they're now aware that they contributed. And that wouldn't be a very good feeling, to know that I was ripped from my family and, yes, given to them because they wanted a child, but not in an ethical way. So that would be painful on anybody.